Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to the ROKER RAPPORT podcast in association with the Sunlun Community Soup Kitchen. We're following our 1-0 victory at the Stadium Light against Portsmouth last weekend. We now look ahead to Sunderland's next fixture in League One, which takes us on the road to the northwest for a trip to Bolton Wanderers. And to help us bring us up to speed with all the latest at the University of Bolton Stadium, and you can probably tell it took all my concentration not to say Reebok there, because I was desperate to say it, but we're very pleased to have the company of not only the chief football writer for the Bolton News, but also presenter of the excellent Bolton Wanderers podcast, The Buff, which is, of course, Marc Iles. Hello, Marc.
Hello. Oh, that's a wonderful intro. I'm more than happy with that. I might just take a little audio clip so I can replay that one to my audience.
Yeah, welcome once again to the ROKER RAPPORT podcast. How are you keeping, mate?
Yeah, not bad. Aside from the fact I've chosen the busiest office in the world to record this from, we've got a full newsroom of people that'll be talking and a pneumatic drill going on outside. So, barring a police raid or something, I don't think much else could happen.
So, if everyone listens carefully, will they be able to hear the latest breaking news in Bolton on this day? If
Absolutely, it's a hive of activity. This news desk. It's not at all like the Mary Celeste.
Brilliant. I was going to say, I mentioned The Buff in the intro of the podcast that you do, and I had a listen to that the other day. Absolutely brilliant podcast. Really enjoyed it, and I have to say, I absolutely love the intro song that you've got for that podcast. Did you and the others do it, or did you get someone else to do that? To
be fair, we used to have a version of that music that we did. I did myself. But then a professional musician with access to a lot better equipment came along. His name Simon Woods. I'll give him a shout out because he's excellent. And he ended up doing most of the jingles for us, and he's been fantastic, a Bolton fan. So it gives an air of professionality to the podcast, which is sadly lacking with the presenters. So yeah, at least we get that right.
Well, it got me laughing before it even started, and I'm maybe going to make the suggestion to the echelons of ROKER RAPPORT that we might need a jingle for our podcast, but we'll see how that goes.
I'm sure there are fans out there that would love to write that one. It's I don't know why clubs don't do it more often. They have that horrible music that they use with these clip shows and that. Like, why don't they just ask the fans? There's musicians out there that love to get their stuff out there.
Yeah, it's that stock stuff on file. I was going to say as well that I particularly like the name game. I started playing along with that. The only one I think I beat you on, or got quicker, was Own Coil. I think that was the only one I jumped in on before you lads, mainly because that's kind of my era with kind of Bolton thinking back. I go straight back to the McGinley, Patterline and Owen Coyle days.
Well, the game's called Danny Shitu. The reason being is that if you actually put Danny Shitu in, it's a game stopper, because on the alphabet game, no player begins with you see. So that's why we call it Danny Shitu. But yeah, they play it on the coaches going to away games and all sorts. So it has caught on. We are pushing for it to become an Olympic sport as well. So you may see me in a GB vest at an Olympics in time to come, because I'm not bad. I've only been beaten a couple of times.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one. I found myself joining in, but struggled with some of the older Bolton players. But we spoke to you last ahead of the reverse fixture up in the northeast. I listened back to you speaking back with Rich back in September. Firstly, I've decided we won't mention Phil Parkinson as much. But secondly, and we'll talk about the game itself in a bit, but I assume you made the trip up, and did you get out and about and enjoy your trip up to Sunlun?
I enjoyed it. I made the trip up there with an ex-Bolton player, somebody who probably isn't held in as high regard up in your neck of the woods as he is down in the northwest, and that's David Wheater, the former Middlesbrough centre-back. So we ended up and we always seek out somewhere to eat before the game. And we decided to go into the fans cafe up there, and we sat down and there's nobody in there. And I thought, well, we're quite safe here. But steadily, as soon as we'd sat down, people started coming in, and you could see these Sunderland fans walking in. It's like, seriously, is that David Wheater? Seriously? And there's people pointing. I'm thinking, we are never going to make our way through these bacon butties. No chance are we going to be able to get out of here alive. But everybody was fantastic. what they did to the sandwiches or to the brews, I don't mind. I don't even want to think about what the kitchen may have done to his, but I certainly enjoyed mine. And best of all, Wheats paid for it as well. So jobs are good.
Good stuff. Well, as I said, we'll come back to the match itself back from September in a bit. But I just wanted to start with how things are in general now at Bolton, because I was looking back to that time in September. Apart from kind of playing us, of course, the other big story at that time, I think it was the week you played us, actually, was that the new owners, Football Ventures, they'd agreed settlements with unsecured creditors that they inherited from 2019. So I was reading by doing that, it meant the threat of the 15-point deduction that hung over the club was removed. Was that a bit of a watershed moment for the club that meant kind of the major financial problems were in the past and the club could begin to move forward?
I don't think it was unexpected at the time. In fairness, I think the way they've operated since they've taken on the club has been pretty standard, pretty professional, well, very professional. They're not spending millions and millions of pounds. They're not splashing money around. No, they never promised to do that either, but they have said they will pay the debts they need to pay in order to take over a football club. And part of that is, of course, substantiating those unsecured creditors, of which there were many, many. I mean, there was a list a mile long, the number of local companies in Bolton that have lost out, as well as, your taxmans, all the other stuff that St. John's Ambulance, Police Force, all that kind of thing. Everybody lost out because of the actions of the former Bolton owner. And the way that football clubs work, you've got to pay a certain number of pence in a pound eventually to substantiate the EFL rules, or else otherwise you get penalised a second time. And so thankfully, yes, everything worked out quite well on that front. And hopefully now Bolton can start being built in a more sustainable, professional way than it had been in the past. Although I will say that Bolton's problems did not come as a direct consequence of overspending. They weren't spending millions of pounds under the previous owner at all, by the way. It was a result of him not paying the bills. That was it. He literally said at one stage, that's it, I'm not paying any more bills. They were expensive bills. They racked up very quickly, and all these unsecured creditors and secured creditors built up. And that's what the mess Bolton were in. Yes, of course, historically in the Premier League days, Bolton probably did spend beyond their means, and that's how historical debts stacked up. That owner, Eddie Davis, who was a Bolton fan, wiped off a lot of those debts. So it's not A plus B equals C. It wasn't a kind of Premier League luxuries that maybe, you look at the way Sunderland operated in the Premier League, and if they had financial problems down the road, that's possibly the same sort of course. But no, it's a complicated one. I could write books on it. I will. Maybe
one day I'll look forward to that. But yeah, actually, you mentioned the Premier League days there, and actually, just quickly, I mean, going back a bit further, because I went down my usual rabbit holes that I usually do when I do some kind of reading about the opposition, but I couldn't help but get all nostalgic looking back at lists of seasons for Bolton Wanderers, and seeing kind of 10, 15 years ago, likes of Nicholas Anelka being the club's top scorer 2 seasons in a row, finishing top 8 in the Premier League 4 seasons in a row, getting to the last 16 of the UEFA Cup. Those were in the days that competition was completely ruined. But that wasn't that long ago. And it's funny because I know Rich was talking to you last time about parallels over recent years between the two clubs. But actually going back to that era, I know, Sunderland had a period under Peter Reid where we finished 7th twice in a row, 20 odd years ago. And it's still a thorn for those fans who lived through that and saw that we didn't, established ourselves and kind of kick on and become a Premier League side almost permanently, with the Evertons and the Spurs and those sort of clubs. I mean, do a lot of Bolton fans talk about that period in terms of missing a chance to establish itself as a club in the Premier League?
I think it's fresh enough in the memory for a generation of Bolton fans to yearn for the Yuri Djorkaevs and the JJ Kochers and the Kevin Davis and Jussi Escalainen and people like that. And obviously it's very fresh in the memory for journalists like me who managed to dine at the nice press boxes. But we've done League Two now. We're on the way back up. With the ascent has started. But that said, I think there's an argument to say that Bolton were punched above their weight as a top 8 club in the Premier League. A lot of people will say, well, had money been made available for Sam Allardyce at the time he was really knocking on that door, could Bolton have established themselves as that top 6 regular club? I have my doubts, because historically Bolton have been a team that has moved between the top 2 divisions. They've spent a long time. In fact, they've actually spent more time in the top division without winning it than any other club. But in recent times, certainly the last 4 or 5 decades, they have flitted between the top 2 divisions, and very occasionally below that, as they find themselves now. But I think it'd be stretching it to say that they could have been a top 6 regular club, but that doesn't stop you yearning for seeing the Premier League and everything it had to offer, and dining at that top table, because it was great. And I do miss the times where Bolton would go to Sunderland and get Roy Keane the sack. I mean, that's one of my favourite memories, going and beating Sunderland. I think it was 4-0 on the day, and as bad as I've seen a Sunderland team play ever since. I just thought I'd throw that little grenade in there.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Roy Keane would argue against that. He got the sack and he walked, non his character. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's something all well and good about the top, press boxes and whining and dining there, but something beautiful about pie and peas at Accrington Stanley, surely, as well.
You don't get anything at Accrington Stanley other than dripped on.
Really?
That's all you get at Accrington Stanley. There are some lovely people down in their leagues 1 and 2, but no, the standard of the press food really has. I mean, I'm wasting away, as you can tell.
Well, I mean, you were talking about it being fresh in the mind that period, and I was looking actually last couple of home games, seeing attendances of around kind of 12,000-14,000, depending on midweek, who's the opposition, all that sort of stuff. But have the kind of the events of the recent years meant that it's taken some persuading for some to come back week after week, or do you think that's kind of, this is Bolton's kind of core support until you start moving back up the league?
Yeah, I think historically, actually, the average attendances at the moment are actually quite decent for this level of football. If you look back to the Burnham Park days, which is where Bolton played before they moved to the Reebok in '97, when they played at this level of football quite briefly and one season in Division 4, the crowds were much lower. So actually, they're doing quite well for what they're doing at the moment. But it's fair to say, under the previous ownership, it's well documented. The crowds dipped. People didn't want anything to do with him. There were protests outside. It was a right mess. So yes, I think this new ownership and all that's gone with it has kind of built people's trust up a little bit more. And also you can tell, and yourselves, you look around the sponsorship boards and you look at the hospitalities and all the stuff that help pay the bills. It's not there when things are going bad. It's just not there. But that's starting to fill up again now, and it's starting to look more like a football club.
Yeah. Well, I mean, back on the pitch, I mean, going back to the game between the two sides back in September, obviously, there was still a good feeling around Bolton after getting promoted last season from League Two, and you'd got off to a good start this season. And at the time of the game, you were 8th in the table, but it was kind of towards the end of September. But, that was a close game, and we nicked it with the only goal of the game through Carl Winchester. But Bolton had more possession, more shots on goal. So what were your memories of the actual game in the reverse fixture?
I thought Bolton played well. I really did. We came away from that one feeling a little bit. And it was a similar story to a few games around that time. Bolton played, Sheffield Wednesdays, people like that they'd done enough to get something from a game. They created chances, didn't take them. And ultimately, that's what led to them slipping down the division, because ultimately the confidence started to get affected. Then they were making chances and missing them. And as soon as they missed a chance, it was, first goal wins, basically. So at that point in time, you're right, Bolton were flying high. They were playing really good stuff. I think they continued to play really good stuff for about a month, and then it started to really slow down for them. And it's only very recently started to change for the better, really. There were a few people maybe looking over their shoulders and hoping they didn't slip too far back.
Yeah, I was going to say about that run, because after that defeat, the Stadium of Light, Bolton won the next 2 actually after that, but then went on a run of winning just 2 of the next 13 after that. I mean, you've just said it was kind of missing their chances. I mean, was it just as simple as that? I mean, I don't know if there was implications with maybe COVID or injuries or anything like that, or was it just purely one of those, you get stuck in a rut?
Yeah, I think for the first sequence of defeats up to about November time, it was very. If you looked at the stats, there's certain stats, the XGs and the final third entries. If you subscribe to them and you looked at Bolton and looked at their raw statistics for the way they attacked, you would think they were top of the table. And I think Ian Evatt famously said after the Sheffield Wednesday game, "I think we're the best team in the league." Now, he was saying that for various reasons. I think he's been misquoted mainly by people down the road in Lancashire, but. The bottom line was, yes, they were at that point in time one of the most effective teams going forward, and they created a lot of chance that day at Stadium Light as well. They could easily have got something from the game had they been a bit more clinical in front of goal, but shoulda, woulda, coulda. That's all totally accepted up this way. They started losing games, and then towards Christmas they did get big injuries to key players. They lost a few, and then they had to cancel 3 games through COVID. So it's a snowball. There's all sorts of reasons for it. Ultimately, they started losing confidence and losing games, and you can't get away from that. They sort of October time, Ian Evatt turned around and said, "Listen, it's going to be a rough ride now between now and Christmas, but I think we can fix it in January by bringing players in." He's now had that opportunity, and things have started to improve. So, if it improves to the degree this time last year, Bolton were 20th in League Two. They got promoted. So who knows?
Well, actually, you mentioned that kind of enforced break that they had, because Bolton only managed 1 game between the 11th of December and 11th of January. And considering that run they were on, did that give an opportunity for Ian Evatt to kind of take stock and get the team on the training pitch and kind of work on a few things?
Well, they would have got them on the training pitch had it been open, but that also closed.
Right.
Because of the COVID problems. Literally, the whole squad was off at one stage. So it was bad. I think a few rival teams maybe looked at it and said, "Hey, this is suiting Bolton, having games called off whilst as the transfer deadline the transfer window rather comes closer." And it did, and there's no question about it. That the fact that it didn't have to play those 3 games meant they can play them with the stronger squad down the line. But it was a fairly legitimate reason. I mean, the whole place was completely shut down. So, it was a difficult time, particularly difficult if you have to fill newspapers, I think, when there's no games going on. But, that's very selfish view. I appreciate that. That's what I'm on here for.
You can write about the weather down at the training ground or something like that, or how many puddles there were or something. But
exactly.
But yeah, you mentioned January, and January so far. I mean, Bolton have been busy. Back on the pitch, they've won 2 and lost 1 in January, so halted kind of that poor run we were talking about. Off the pitch, Dion Charles has signed from Accrington Stanley. Marlon Fossey has joined on loan from Fulham. Aaron Morley from Rochdale. Keeper James Trafford from Manchester City, which I thought was quite an interesting one. And striker John Dari Bodvarsson has joined on a free from Millwall. So, I mean, I know they've only joined over the last few weeks, but that upturn in form, has that been more of a change in the personnel that was already there, or are these new signings having an immediate impact?
They had a very quick impact, to be fair to them, particularly Fossey on the right hand side. You'll see him a mile off, massive hair, very quick, great athlete. James Trafford, as you mentioned there, new goalkeeper. I think the previous guy, Joel Dixon, was suffering for confidence. And when your goalkeeper's not playing well, it radiates, doesn't it? So I think him coming in has provided a little bit of fresh confidence at the back as well. We've not really seen a massive amount of Bodvarsson. Dion Charles got a cracking goal at the weekend to win the game at Shrewsbury. And then Aaron Morley's sat in and seems like a decent ball player as well in midfield. So what the signings have done is given Bolton a bit more flexibility tactically. They were playing 4-3-3 because they had to. I think for between October and at the end of December, there was no other option really, and they were still having to put right backs at left back and playing strikers in midfield just to fill in the gaps. But now they're getting players back from injury. Plus, you've got these signings. All of a sudden, you could ask me to name a team for the weekend against Sunderland, and I would struggle. A couple of weeks back, that would have been easy. I would have been able to just tell you the team right now. But now both the shape of the team and the personnel are very much, up for grabs, I suppose.
Yeah. And I mean, just talking specifically about Dion Charles, he was actually signed for a reported 6-figure sum which I imagine was quite good for you to report on a money signing. But it seemed in the comments of the transfer that Ian Evatt was kind of really excited at the prospect of spending real money on a player. But was that another sign of the progress that the club's making off the field?
Now, to put it in context, before Dion Charles came in, and it's £320,000 that Bolton have signed him for. Now, that's also in increments as well, by the way. That's not all at once. Still, it's steady on. But previously, the last guy that came in for any cash sum was Josh McGuinness in August of 2018, £200,000. That did not end well. And then previously before that, it was a guy called Filip Twadzik who came in from Celtic in January 2015. So in 7 years, I'm just trying to do the mental maths, 6.5 years, there have been 2 cash signings, one of which was a random check that nobody remembers. And the other guy was Josh McGuinness, who is not going to go down in the pantheon of great Bolton number 9s, let's say. Yeah. There was another guy as well called Christian Doidge, who went up to Hibs in the end. Now, Doidge was meant to sign for £1 million at Bolton, but Bolton decided they didn't want to pay and just left Forest Green in the lurch completely. They loaned him for a few months and then just said, I don't think we're going to bother paying anymore. And the poor sod had to go back to Forest Green with his tail between his legs. Lovely fella, but that was typical of Bolton at the time. I mean, all the building that Bolton have done has been done with zero cash, really, in real terms.
And it's interesting that you actually gave me a figure there, because one of my pet hates, and I don't know whether it is in the press, but the undisclosed fee.
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting.
It was undisclosed, but so you have your ways and means of finding out.
Well, it's nice to hear a figure. You always used to see a figure on what player went for, and you don't seem to see that anymore. I mean, back on the pitch, and again, I was listening to your last podcast, and you've mentioned it there, discussing this new change in formation. That sounded like a 3-5-2, 5-3-2, whichever way you want to look at it. So essentially wing backs and kind of 2 up top. You've had 2 wins from the last 2 games. But it got us thinking how, and I think you actually mentioned it on the podcast, but how rare it is to see 2 strikers up front for a side. I'd prefer to go back to those times, because I just think I used to love seeing 2 strikers up front, and it made the kind of game a better thing, I think. But has that played a big part in the last 2 games, that you've actually got 2 up front? Has that made a big difference?
Certainly seems that Bolton have got the option now, because they are a very possession-based team. Now, that's great when things are going well and you're scoring goals, and that possession equals goals and results. Unfortunately, when you start losing games or you start draining in confidence, as they did, all of a sudden a possession game equals frustration in the stands. It can seem very side to side. You see players maybe not taking the responsibility on the ball that you want and passing it on, and it becomes very lateral. And that's what Bolton have done. Now, for me, the way that they've tweaked it now in this last couple of games has made it so that, yes, they do want to play from the back. Yes, they're still encouraging the players to pass the ball, but you have got that option of going long and mixing it up a little bit more. They've played Amadou Bakayoko further forward. He's quite good in the air. He's quite a physical presence. Charles is also another one that's happy to challenge for headers. So they've got that option of going slightly longer. They remain a bit of a work in progress. It didn't all work at Shrewsbury last weekend. It didn't all work against Ipswich. On the ball, I think they're still working out the shape a little bit. But it's nice to see them mix it up a bit. And as you say, seeing that 2 up front and seeing the penalty box, with a bit more in it, because poor Owen Doyle, who had led the line for Bolton for most of the season, the number of times you saw crosses coming in and there's 4 defenders against little Doyler, and he's never going to win him, in a million years. But actually having that extra body up there is interesting to see. And I think it's going to help him in the long run.
Well, I was just about to ask, I mean, is this a permanent move? Because I know, Sunderland last weekend, we had a tweak of our formation. We went with 3 at the back. We've just made a new signing at the back, and he slotted in there to kind of have that extra defender. But is this something, do you think it's a permanent move? Because against teams that have played that formation, Sunderland have actually struggled against that wing-back formation this season. So do you think he's going to stick with it?
I'd be surprised if he changes it at the weekend. Not impossible, because actually they changed second half against Shrewsbury. They were struggling a little bit, as I say, on the ball with the 3-5-2. I think eventually that will be a 3-4-1-2, which is Evatt's kind of most preferred formation. But I don't think they have the midfielder they want. They're trying to sign Kyle Dempsey from Gillingham as the the one behind the two, if you will. So at the moment, I think it's more like a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2. God, I mean, I've confused myself, honestly, these numbers. But anyway, I think being that has worked for the past couple of games, it would surprise me. But they changed to 4-3-3 in the second half against Shrewsbury, brought on Dapo Afolayan, who is Bolton's top scorer and arguably the most dangerous player they've got. But he doesn't necessarily suit the 3-5-2, so or doesn't bring the best out of him. Better in the 4-3-3. So he's got that option, and there's a couple of different tweaks he can make. That's what I mean. It's kind of keeping everybody guessing a little bit more. It's a lot more interesting than knowing exactly what your first 11 is going to be.
Yeah, and I was looking at Bolton's home record this season. Bit of a mixed bag. Won 5, lost 3 from 12 played. So I think you've played at least 2 less than most other clubs at home so far. But Ian Evatt, I mean, he seems like the type of manager to be on the front foot. Is that the usual approach at home for Bolton to go kind of after teams and be positive? Where and where will the biggest threats come from?
100%. I think if there's a criticism to be levelled at Ian Evatt is that he's possibly a little bit too gung-ho at times, and you score 3, we'll score 4. That's always been the philosophy. I think he's very much, he thinks his football will win the day eventually anyway, and that's particularly at home. I think he wants people on the front foot. So, I can definitely say there'll be an attacking game. The first goal has always been crucial, really, with Bolton. I think when they've led a game, they've never lost it. So if they can get their noses in front, generally speaking, they do well to hold on. But then again, they've conceded first, I think it's 19 times out of 26 or 27 games now, which is madness. That's been the shift. I think defensively they have looked better with this system, which is why I think he will keep with it. Not conceding that first goal seems to be the real big one, and that's probably what type of game I think will happen on Saturday. Is that Bolton will definitely not look to concede that first goal and see what their attacking trio or whatever it might be can do for them. But main threats, I told you about Fossey. I think down the right-hand side, he's been excellent. Real athlete, gets plenty of crosses into the box. And he's backed up as well by Gethin Jones on that right-hand side of the 3. Just provides calm across the whole line. So it gives him the license to bomb on and do a bit. Declan John on the left-hand side, weirdly enough. Sunderland fans will remember him, or maybe won't remember him. He warmed many a bench potentially. Didn't ever get a chance at Sunderland under Phil Parkinson, but he's done quite well at Bolton, and he's starting to show a little bit more form as well to kind of balance things up on the left-hand side as well. So that's where the width will come from. As I say, Dapo Afolayan, if he gets on the pitch, is definitely Bolton's unpredictable factor. He can carry the ball, he runs well, he draws a lot of fouls. He's the most fouled player in League One this season. And he scored 10 goals as well. So he's a good one to watch, basically, if Dapo gets on the pitch.
Yeah, it'd be interesting for most Sunderland fans to see Declan Jones play, to see what type of footballer he actually is.
I think he did play. I've got the game there. I can have it under. Did he play? Oh, he didn't play. He didn't. Liam Gordon played at the Stadium Lights. This will be a first.
Listening back, I remember you saying he picked up a knock, which was no surprise to most Sunderland fans. But I mean, just on Ian Evatt, you mentioned him there about maybe being a bit gung ho in his style. But I mean, he's only been a manager for around 4 years, and the fantastic job he did at Barrow, and then Bolton, taking a kind of a leap of faith in a sense, because he'd only done that one job with Barrow, but then promotion to League One. I mean, his stock's just gone up and up. Is it a slight concern that he might be picked up by a Championship club in the future if Bolton can't kind of step up? Because I mean, I know they're in a mess, but he started his career at Derby County. There's rumours that Wayne Rooney could be moving on and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, does he realise the big project he's got with Bolton, or do you think he's ambitious enough to maybe jump at one of those jobs?
It's honestly, I love talking to fans of other clubs who have obviously got a very different perspective on things, because I think generally speaking, Bolton fans won't have even anticipated that question and they possibly be scratching their head on it, because I think fans most fans, and I don't know it's just Bolton, Sunderland, I'm pretty sure, I've watched a documentary, I'm pretty sure they share the same mentality. It's glass half full most of the time. So a lot of Bolton fans will see last season being, wow, what a terrible start they made. And then finally they kind of got up to that third place and got promotion. That's what Ian Evatt was brought in to do. He did it, but there will be people that reflect back and say, well, I didn't do it very well. This season, they've started League One quite well and have dropped back. And a lot of fans will be saying, well, you're not doing very well now, are you, at this higher level? And yet you're saying that Derby County might be looking at him as now, I think he's a manager with a lot to give. I think he's definitely learning on the job. I think he's definitely made mistakes, and I think he holds his hands up with a lot of them. But at the moment, I think he appreciates he is on that kind of learning journey with Bolton, and he's with Bolton at the moment. I think there may come a time where the other clubs look at him and maybe wish to take him, but I don't think that's this time. I don't think he's quite ready for that next jump yet, and nor a Bolton. So I think they take that together. And then you ask me this question in 12 months when we're both in the Championship. Maybe, who knows? Or at least we might get you in a cup or something, who knows? But anyway, you ask me this question in 12 months, then maybe I have a different answer for you. But it's funny how other clubs sometimes see it. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, kind of listening back to, talking about this project, listening back to when you spoke to Rich with us back in September, you were kind of hinting at the possibility then that obviously you were riding high still, 8th in the league at the time. You were talking about maybe a push for the playoffs that season. So, I mean, after trailing off from that good start you made, where the expectation levels, were probably raised at that point. I mean, where are those expectation levels now? Because it seems like Bolton is still looking upwards, maybe a hangover from last season and what you did, but there's only a 5-point gap between Bolton and the bottom four at the minute. Yeah,
well, I mean, no different to Sunderland is that no Bolton fan will think their team should be at this level of football, no question. Historically, I know Sunderland spent fewer seasons in the bottom two divisions, and Bolton went all the way, as we've mentioned. But historically, it's a second or first tier club, both teams that take the pitch on Saturday. So I think whilst Bolton are not competing for promotion, they will always be, the fan base will always be expecting them to look up and do something about it. I think the realists potentially will have taken a season of consolidation. I think sometimes when you look at history and see how Bolton teams have done it in the past, they've come up to this level, and then it's been the following season that they've challenged for playoffs and pushed on. I think the way that the squad is built, I think it's fair to give Ian Evatt that season of consolidation before expecting the challenge, because there's been a lot of rebuilding done, certainly this month. So it'll be interesting. But then again, you look at last season, as I say, 20th in League Two last season. They were legitimately, this time last year, people saying Ian Evatt shouldn't be the manager of Bolton Wanderers. We should get him out. And, look what happened. Football, funny old game, as Jimmy Greaves used to say. And, you can never write anything off. The only thing I always say, and Bolton will always produce some degree of drama, and I don't think I've had it all season. I've been doing this a long time, longer than I care to remember, but there's never been a dull one.
I think the first thing I'm going to do when I come off this is check the odds on Bolton getting promoted. I might have a cheeky 50 pence if it's long enough, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I was looking back at our past meetings between the two clubs. We haven't won at Bolton in our previous 3 visits. Our last win came back in 2011 when Steve Bruce's side beat Owen Coyle's Bolton Wanderers, as it was then. It was 2-0, goals from Stefan Sessegnon and Nicholas Bentner. Blast from the past. Both goals came in the last 10 minutes of the game, interestingly enough. But how do you expect the game on Saturday to pan out?
I remember that game, and that was towards the end of the season as well, wasn't it? That was a real hammer blow, I think, for Bolton, and because they got relegated that season. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think that first goal is the crucial one. If Bolton were to concede it, then I would fear for them a little bit, because the losing run has been kind of fresh enough in the mind potentially to still play on it. But if they were to get it, then I fancy them. And there's a lot of confidence in the last two results. There'll be a big crowd there, a massive away following. Hats off to you guys once again for filling that away end. I'm sure there'll be plenty of noise there. I think at the moment you're talking about just over 18,000 expected, so it's going to be a good atmosphere. I think it's going to be a good game. But I think Bolton are just coming into that little bit of form that might just give them a little bit of a push. I quite fancy him. I'm rarely optimistic, really rarely optimistic, but I quite fancy him Saturday.
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually. You're talking about these early goals. Sunderland have scored quite a few early goals recently.
There's where your money is.
but it'll be interesting to see. It sounds like that it's going to be all important first goal of the weekend. You mentioned the away following. We sold out around a week ago, around just over, I think it was over 5,000 that we've sold in the away allocation. You said about 20,000. I might be just, because I might have my kind of Sunlun hat on here, but is this one of the big games of the season? Kind of Sunderland at home.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's still a Premier League fixture in my head. I don't know. I see that on the page, and that's I can still see those times. I've many happy days traveling up to the Stadium of Light and doing Premier League games. It's bamboozling to me that this is being played in League One, but nevertheless, that's where we are. And the sooner we realise it, the sooner we get out of this bloody mess. Unquestionably, there'll be people there knowing that it's going to be a big atmosphere and knowing that it's going to be a big game. So that will boost the gates. I'm sure Bolton Wanderers will be more than happy to take the King's shilling from the Sunderland lot, especially. I hope they've just stocked the bars around the place, because you guys know how to empty them.
yeah, we'll not have a good time, but
absolutely.
But yeah, I assume it goes without saying you're going to be there. But I don't know about yourself in League One, but this season, but there's quite a lot of, I'd say we're talking about Bolton Wanderers versus Sunderland being, could be a Premier League fixture. There's quite a few this season, and when we go on our travels or when they come to the Stadium of Light, these type of fixtures actually, regardless of Bolton being 15th or whatever in the league, it's the kind of the prestige, it's that name. There's quite a few teams in League One where it gets the blood pumping a little bit, and you really look forward to these type of games.
Yeah, definitely. Been to Sheffield Wednesday and Hillsborough, and you get that feeling. Same at your place, same at Ipswich. Not really Wigan, but definitely the other clubs that I've mentioned there. And yeah, it does get the blood pumping. It's there's an atmosphere. It actually feels like a match. You do sometimes go to some of these smaller stadia, and it doesn't quite feel the same way. It feels a little bit like you're the fish out of the water. But I'm sure you guys will know that just as much as anybody. But no, I'm sure Saturday will be different. It will feel just like it was 2011 again, except I haven't got as much hair.
Yeah, no, I wasn't quite as grey back then, but there you go. But well, I hope you enjoy the game on Saturday, Mark. I hope it's a good day. I hope it's a good atmosphere. I'm sure it will be. And thanks for joining us and taking the time out. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and all the best for the rest of the season, mate.
Always a pleasure. Thanks very much, mate.
Yeah, and as long as you can take points off a few of those sides up the top, we'd be very grateful if you could do that in the run-in.
I'd take any points from anybody in time. Honestly, it's so much better. The weekend is so much better when you've actually got a result, and not from a fan's perspective, but more from a journalist perspective. People want to talk to you. It's much better. Much better.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Mark. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. Keep a lookout at ROKER Report for all the build-up ahead of the game at Bolton on Saturday. And keep an eye out all the usual places for the next pod. That should be dropping very soon. But from us, it's bye for now.